Welcome to our Chapter 8 installment. So basically, we're going to again cut to the chase as to what is it grammatically we're talking about in Chapter 8. And so, as we continue with the language and we unlock our next level, one of the first things we'll have to do is look at the grammar. So, the first thing we're going to talk about are moods. So, immediately when you hear the word mood, I want you to think about verbs. So the main focus for Chapter 8 are verbs. Now usually we think about them having tense, like present and past, and we think about them having person, like first and second and third. We think about being singular and plural, but we often don't think of mood. And mood here indicates the intention of the statement. So for example, there are three major moods of a verb. And here we're seeing two. We have our indicative mood, which is the mood we use 95% of the time we're talking. And then we have the imperative mood. So we're going to dive into exactly what they are. So we've already been in the indicative mood for the first 7 chapters. So you're going to recognize a lot of this. So the first thing is the indicative mood does is it makes a statement, such as he is working in the field. I am a teacher. You are a student. These are all statements. It doesn't have to be fact. I mean, I could say, I am really Superman. It's still in the indicative mood, even though it's false. It also asks questions. So anytime you ask a question, you're technically in the indicative mood. So if we look at what that means to us as Latin students, it means that we're going to see what we call our personal endings. So these endings that you're so used to seeing. If you recall, we started with the T, and then in Chapter 4 we moved on to the NT, and then in Chapter 5 we learned about the first and second person, singular and plural. So whenever you see these endings in Latin, you're in the indicative mood. So it means somebody's making a statement or asking a question. What we've unlocked in Chapter 8 is the imperative mood, which gives us commands and orders, suggestions, things of that nature. Go to your room, don't go to your room, sit down, don't sit down, come in, don't come in, both what we would call positive, things that you're ordering people to do, right, and negative. Now you can see they are formed just a little bit differently, but they all involve the infinitive. The infinitive is what we talked about back in Chapter 6, and that's the form of the verb that always comes second in your word list, and always, well, I should say 99% of the time, ends in RE, although we know sum esse, esse ends in an SE instead of the normal RE like we might see here with timere, which is the verb to be afraid. So here we would be ordering someone to be afraid, fear me, time, timete. And here we would order somebody not to be afraid, noli timere, nolite timere. So what you notice is in the positive, we start with that second principal part, and all we have to do is remove the RE. And whatever's left is the singular command. So if we wanted to order a group of people, or more than one, all we have to do is add a TE. So time to timete. This is evident in every single class while I start it by saying solvete, and you guys respond back by saying solve. I add the te because I'm addressing all of you. You guys omit the te because you're just addressing me. So we've really been using the imperative mood at the start of every class. Now negative imperatives, you actually don't have to mess with the infinitive. You can leave it as timere because you're going to use this, actually another verb that we'll talk about in Chapter 15. And that verb, noli and nolite, is going to indicate to you two things. One, you're telling somebody don't. And two, whether it has the te or not will indicate how many people you're addressing. So noli timere has an implication that I'm talking to one person, whereas nolite timere does not. So again, just to recap, imperative mood, giving commands or orders. You can tell somebody to do something or to not or don't do something. And it all revolves around the infinitive, the version of the verb that has the RE. So if you omit it, you're doing a positive command. If you leave the RE on and add noli or nolite, then you're telling somebody don't do something. And that's really the main driving force in this chapter. So when we look in the text, you're going to be looking for quotations. You're going to be looking for conversations. We're going to see little plays that'll develop where people are speaking to each other. And that'll be where you'll see the opportunity for the imperative mood. Where more often than not, we're usually going to be over here in the indicative. But it's good to be aware of the potential, especially when you get into poetry. Because then there's a lot of imperatives that are used, and it'll be useful to understand the difference between the personal endings we've been seeing and some version of the infinitive over here. Now, there are two smaller topics that are really just things we've already been seeing. So in chapter 7, we talked about how we had the verb posum and how we had ao and exao the chapter before. And by simply adding a preposition or some kind of prefix, we just alter the meaning of verbs we already know. So take, for example, re, back, right? Common prefix, and when we add it to words like revocat, instead of he or she calls, now it's he or she calls back. Or if we add it with convoco, convocare, or here, convocat, we're saying that he calls together. And sometimes ad or ak, we attach ak usually when the word itself begins with a C. And ad like an adsum, where it changed from I am to I am present. Akkurat, which is not just runs, but runs towards. And then we have ab, which is from, so we have absum and abeant. We have x or a. Now, the difference between the ab, a, x, a is similar to what we do with English with the article a or an. A car, but an apple. So if the next word starts with a vowel, we use ab or x. If the next word starts with a consonant, we use the a or the e. And simply by adding them to a verb, we just imply that we're coming from or out of that place. And then in also implies into. So ineo, I go into. Inducitus, you lead into, you induct. Right. So again, these are just compound verbs. So getting used to seeing these prefixes, maybe making some flashcards, just so that you know re means back, con means together. And this is the kind of word building that'll not only help you in the class with translations, but goes outside of that with your SATs and with just general word knowledge. Knowing these prefixes and what they generally mean can help you. Take, for instance, con. A lot of times in Spanish, you'll hear this. For example, if you've ever bought chili con carne, it's chili with meat, because con in Spanish is with. So here we're seeing it with, meaning together. You have a salsa and chili together. So again, a lot of this can supersede other languages, can help you strengthen you within your English vocabulary. And then the last one is a battle we've been battling for a while. Prepositions, and whether the object of that preposition, whatever comes after it, will be in the accusative or the ablative. So here are the ones we've had so far that go with the accusative. So you can see odd, and since it's working with the word school, it's in the accusative. So we're saying going to school or to the school. Here with in is a tricky one. In with the accusative is clearly into, onto, and even against, as we saw in our chapter 7 story. Per agros, through the fields. Here we're seeing an accusative plural. Circum viam, around the wall. Prope navem, with our new third declension endings, near the ship. Versus the ablative, where I began to talk about the SIDP space acronym. As you can see, we only have the ACE in space and the I in SID, but over time we'll grow and learn the rest of them. So we have ob, which is the opposite of odd. It's away from, so if you're absent from school, you're away from school. Aludo. In here, when it's used with the ablative versus the accusative is in the house, currently in the house, where over here with in casum, we're highlighting that movement into. So we're highlighting the change of scenery rather than talking about where we currently are. Then we have cum, which goes with the ablative with friends, cum amicis, ablative plural, and enawe, from the ship, or out of the ship, exiting or going from the ship. So again, really keeping straight which prepositions work with it, which case can help, especially when we think of words like in, where we could be denoting a different meaning. So these are the topics that we're studying. We're going to continue culturally to talk about the Iliad and the Odyssey, and eventually that'll lead into the Roman epic poem known as the Aeneid. So make sure you read the list on that, write down any important names that come along and how they associate, and remember to look for them in the translation so you can keep clear for yourself who's a Greek, who's a Trojan, and any other stories that are attributed. And don't forget to study your vocab. You got to find a way that works for you. Go through the words, write them out, use flashcards. You got to find which way suits you best. So I hope this was helpful, and hope to get you started and doing really well with Chapter 8. Walete. Or Wale, in case there's just one of you watching.